Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Billy Napier, the Florida Gators, wrapping up their first day of spring practice. And Dill, you're only in shoulder pads and a helmet. Not a ton that you can take away, but this is one of those teams that we had so many questions heading into spring practice. And a lot of those questions just had to go with, like, how is this team going to look from a functional standpoint heading into that 2024 year? And you got some of those answers. Right, Austin Armstrong no longer working just with the safeties, kind of overseeing that defense. Ron Roberts coming in and working with what I think can be one of the most talented linebacker duos you see in the country, and Pup Howard and Shamar James. Couple storylines that we want to talk about after the first day of spring practice. And again, kind of continuing to monitor what we're hearing from this Florida Gators program. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys, and a shout out, as always, to the Florida Gator fans, whether we're talking coaching hires, transfer portal additions, high school commitments. You guys continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support to the boys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, Dill, let's get into this one. I think my biggest takeaway, again, goes back to how is this team, specifically on the defensive side of the football, going to be functioning? Billy Napier makes a lot of changes to this coaching staff. And what I love the most is you taking Austin Armstrong, who I think a lot of Florida fans are excited about what he can be, but he's very inexperienced, and saying, hey, we're going to take a little off your plate. You're just going to be in charge of calling the plays and installing this defense, no longer working with the safeties. And I think that is massive for a guy that I think can design a really good defense. Clearing his plate off a little bit, leaning on some veteran guys like Ron Roberts, I think is absolutely massive for this Florida Gators defense heading into that 2024 year.
As you honestly look, I don't think their defense was schematically broken, and they certainly have the talent. At the end of the day, they need to do a better job developing these guys. You kind of see Shamar James not really taking the step you want to see. A handful of guys in the secondary, you can probably say the same thing. That's what they just need to do the basics better. They need to do the boring things better. And I think a lot of that comes from, that's probably why they needed to overhaul that coaching staff a little bit, add some guys, add some experience. Ron Roberts, as good as it gets in terms of getting the most out of teams. You look at those Baylor teams that he was coaching, not wildly talented, not loaded with a ton of high recruited kids, but really, really solid, didn't make a ton of mistakes. And if Florida can get that type of play, they should be really good, because this is a really pretty talented defense.
That's what we've been saying, and that's what makes spring practice, I think, for the Florida Gators so exciting, is there is a ton of talent on this team, albeit young. It's talent. And it's like, can these guys get developed, take those steps? I want to start with those linebackers, Dill. Again, Pup Howard, Shamar James. Outside of, I can think of maybe a couple linebacker rooms that I'm taking from a pure talent standpoint over those two. That's what excites me the most. You look back at that number, 5.1 yards per carry allowed on the ground for this Florida Gators defense. That was 117th. And we've done a lot of going back and watching that 2023 film. What is the main cause of that number being so poor? And I'm not expunging the defensive line. I think they need to take some steps. We'll talk about what Chapman's going to do with that unit in just a little bit. I thought it came down to the second level tackling, right? And some of the things that you're hearing is, one, Billy Napier saying the tackling is going to be a priority. You talk about doing the boring stuff better. It's not flashy. It's not talking about fancy schemes, but it's making open field tackles. You look at what made Michigan's defense so good. They missed the least amount of tackles across the FBS. It coincided with the best defense you saw in the country. I think this program focusing a little bit more on the simple things, I think, is going to mean massive things for this Gators defense heading into that 2024 season.
And that's when we talk like adding eyes, filling out that coaching staff. Yes. Again, I think we all had some questions like, man, why doesn't he have a special teams coordinator? Why isn't he maximizing the staff? Why doesn't he have a little more experience? I think he kind of made the changes he needs to be made. And I think coming off that year, everyone knew changes had to be made. And I don't think we talking like they should get rid of him. Billy Napier does a really good job getting talent into that door. I did think there needed to be some staff changes. I think he made the right ones. I think Ron Roberts is very emblematic of what they needed to do. They needed more experience and guys who've really proven to be high-level developers. Just looking at Ron Roberts' career, that's what he did. That's what he's always done.
I think you could say the same thing for both the back end and Will Harris, which I want to talk about really quick in terms of I'm excited to see how that secondary shakes out. And again, we didn't have a ton of answers after the first spring practice, but that's something that we're going to be monitoring, right? You have Bryce Thornton and Jordan Castile, two guys that played really solid football for true freshmen. You go bring in some really experienced guys in the back end, DJ Douglas, Asa Turner. There's a lot of different puzzle pieces. And what I'm most interested in is how do these pieces come together? Now, the next thing that I kind of got from the spring practice notes, and we're going to do a little talk on the offense as well, but Dill, the defensive line. And what did Gerald Chapman kept saying there, what you kind of read the spring practice notes, what was the main message? Discipline and details. And I couldn't agree more. Like, you talk about some of the problems with this Gators defensive line, and I mean, even goes to the former Gator Principal U in terms of he was awesome when it comes to just pin your ears back and get after the passer. He was not so awesome in terms of maintaining his outside leverage and keeping runs on the inside. And I think that is something that's going to be hammered away. Again, this team is deep. It's talented up front. Now you got to do the small things the right way. And I think Gerald Chapman understands that. And you kind of hear that message being preached up front on that defensive line.
And they have too many really good young players. I mean, you really like the way Kelby Collins had some real good moments as a freshman. I think TJ Searcy and James Cameron look like they can be really good edge rushers, especially Searcy. I mean, that size and athleticism, like that's kind of what you're looking for. I mean, again, it'll be about them getting the most out of them. And you, very clear, they did not do that last year. I don't think they did that.
It's, again, sorry to cut you off. It's, again, a nice blend of, like, veterans, right? Cam Jackson, Caleb Banks, and then you have some first and second year guys, LJ McCray, Kelby Collins, TJ Searcy. I'm excited about that competition, how that shakes out. I'm excited to see what we're seeing from this defense. Now, Dill, little talk on the offense. And, again, I look at this roster and say, I don't have too many question marks about what this offense is going to look like in 2024 as long as this offensive line takes some steps. And I think the biggest thing that I'm most excited about is they seem to be healthy going into spring practice. Now, you go 12 months ago, couldn't be farther from the case, right? Multiple injuries during spring ball. You didn't have much depth. You didn't have much competition. From what I read, I mean, Austin Barber is the only one that is dealing with some sort of injury in this Florida Gators two deep. And what does that mean? You're getting a lot of competition. You're getting a lot of reps. You're getting a lot of development. And this Florida Gators offensive line, if it takes that step in 2024, this is going to be an offense that takes some strides.
Yeah, because that offense really wasn't the problem. I mean, they could, for the most part, score, especially when their offensive line played solid. I think
yes,
you definitely have enough in Graham Mertz. You really like what he has. Eugene Wilson, obviously a budding star. This is a good enough offense. They'll score enough points. If their offensive line just performs now, I don't necessarily think coming in it's going to be a dominant unit. It's just got to play better than it did last year and be more consistent. But if it does, I think you have no real worries about this offense. I think they should be just fine.
Yeah, we talked about it. If they get that, I mean, moving Damian George, Dill, you guys know, Dill, I don't love to like single-handedly call out players. Damian George, just him not being at the tackle spot, I think is going to make this offensive line massively improve. Like, it was such a problem, especially against those top teams. I think that's massive. A couple other notes. Montrell Johnson repping the number 1 for the jersey. Absolutely love that. DJ Lagway looks like he could play NFL football if he wants to. That body is absolutely insane. He's massive. Looks very athletic. The arm, we all know the arm talent. That's kind of all we have right now. I think you like how healthy they are. You like what Florida is doing in terms of defensive coaching responsibilities. We'll continue to keep you guys updated. Again, a lot more storylines going to come out as the scrimmages get in place, as we kind of get a feel for how this depth chart is going to look. Appreciate you guys, as always, for rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.